Let us pray. Blessed Lord, you have caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning. Grant that we may so hear them, read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them, that by patience and comfort of your holy word we may embrace and ever hold fast to the blessed hope of everlasting life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right. So, verse 10 of Jude. But these people, okay, who are they? False teachers, Gnostics, men who follow their own imagination, men who have a secret knowledge. And what Jude is, he's comparing them to fallen angels and sodomites, and he is comparing them basically to the worst of the worst of the worst. And he's going to continue to do so, okay? So, but these people blaspheme all that they do not understand. Okay, so they don't understand the Old Testament. So by their teaching, they blaspheme what God has written in his word. And they are destroyed by all that they, like unreasoning animals, understand instinctively. Okay? What do we do to unreasoning animals? We eat them. We do. Right? They're put to death. Sheep, pigs, cattle. You know, we eat them. Chickens. They're unreasoning animals. And so Jude's not being very nice here. All right, woe to them, he says, for they walked in the way of Cain. What did Cain do? Let's talk about that. Now, that one we shouldn't have to go back to Genesis to search. We should be able to deal with Cain. I preach on this every year. Okay? Cain and Abel, right? It's the day of sacrifice. There's been a day that's been set apart. You got Cain and Abel. Cain is the, which son is he? He is the farmer? He's the farmer, correct, but which son is he? What? He's the firstborn. He's the firstborn. And Abel is second. So you got Cain and Abel. And what it says there is that, now Adam knew his wife Eve. Now, we know what knowing is in the Bible. Okay? They came together and they conceived. And it says he conceived Cain, and Eve conceived Cain. And then she also conceived Abel. And when Cain is born, what does she say? I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. What's the promise that was made to Eve and the serpent and to the husband who just happened to be standing there? I will put enmity between you and the woman, between her offspring and your offspring. And he shall crush your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So Eve hears this. She believes it. They're kicked out of the garden. You want to get back in the garden? So she has a child. And the child is born, and so she thinks what? He's the Savior. That's what she thinks. I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. Now, never mind that Adam was involved. Okay? Just ignore that little detail there. Okay? Her offspring means on her own. Okay? With the help of the Lord. Now, Eve's not a virgin anymore. So it can't be hers, but she doesn't know that because she's the only woman. So how could it be somebody else? She thinks, this is how trusting she was that God's word and promise would be fulfilled immediately. Now, what happens over the course of time? How do moms treat their firstborn son? Oh, yes, they're special. The sun rises and sets on a firstborn son. What? Unless you have twins. Well, in this case, I believe that Cain and Abel were twins. I do. Because there's only one conception that's mentioned. Just one. Just one event. Adam knew, and then Cain and Abel come forth. And then after the Cain and Abel incident, it says what? Well, Adam knew Eve, and what happened? Seth came forth. So, it's my contention that Cain and Abel were twins. So you've got the firstborn, Cain, and you've got Abel, the secondborn. Could have been identical twins. So, firstborn son, I've gotten a man with the help of the Lord. The sun rises and sets on the firstborn son. She thinks he's special. Oh, Cain, you are so great. Today's the day. You are going to go and make your offering to the Lord. He's going to accept your offering. And guess what? The whole family's going to get to go back into the garden. Okay? So you've been hearing this your whole life, how great you are. And the day comes, and it's time for you to make your sacrifice. But what's the problem for Cain? Cain is filled with pride. He's a worker of the ground. And the Lord, but what is Abel? What's Abel do? He's a herder of animals, of sheep. And so Cain makes his offering. Abel makes his offering. And what does it say? God had no regard for Cain's, but for Abel's sacrifice, God had regard. And how do we know the regard that God had for it? Because he talks about what Abel gave. He doesn't talk about what Cain gave. What did Abel give? Of the first and the best, the fat portions. And Abel gives to the Lord out of faith. He gives out of love. He comes there just as a guy, Abel. He's not expecting anything. He just makes a sacrifice. He gives of the first and he gives of the best. Cain, we don't know the nature of it. Now the joke is, the bad sermon illustration, or the joke, it should be a joke. God doesn't like vegetables. God likes meat. Right? That's not what it is. If Cain had given of his first and best, and had given his offering in faith, he would have had regard for Cain's offering. But he didn't. And so they learned right there in that day that Cain was not going to get them all back into paradise. And they knew that he was not going to be the one who fulfilled the promise. And he also then learned that Abel, somehow, beyond his reasoning, God loves him more and better. Did God love Cain? Of course he did. Of course he did. He loved Abel too. It's not God's fault that Cain gave from pride and arrogance and that Abel gave from humility and faith. Okay? That's not God's fault. The results, are on the basis of what they had done. One gave in faith, one did not. So what happens? Remember what happens? He's filled with pride. Sin is crouching at the door. And he must rule over it, because God says what to him? You know what? What are you upset? Basically, God goes up and says, what are you upset about? If you do good, you'll you'll be recognized, but if you don't, then you won't. And he warns him, you better watch out, because sin is crouching at the door, and you need to rule over it. You need to control yourself. But what did Cain not do? No, he lured his brother out into a field and he killed him. Now, we're not told how, believe it or not, we're not told how he was killed. Now, at this point, there are no swords. There's no, metallurgy going on and smithing happening. So, he either did it with brute force with his fists, or how do we typically imagine that Cain did it? And he broke his head open with a huge rock. That's how we imagine. But it's not actually there. That's what happened. But it stands to reason that that's probably how it was done. So, what happens to Cain? He says, you're cursed. You're gonna have to wander the earth. And God puts a mark on him. Anybody kills Cain, they're gonna, it's going to be a certain level of punishment upon them and all of that. And, so, there was some mercy there. Cain was deserving of death. But he was not going to be killed. So he had to make a life for himself out there with his wife and his family, and could no longer work the ground. Abel, obviously, what do we say about him? Abel's blood for vengeance cries, but the blood of Jesus, what? For mercy cries, right? So Abel's life of faith ends. And so this is a metaphor or a parable for the church. The faithful, what happens to the faithful? They are persecuted. Cain here is an unbeliever who persecutes the faithful Abel. Okay? What do we see throughout history? The faithful are persecuted and scorned by those who are filled with pride and unbelief. So this happens, it happened to Abel. Who also did it happen to? I gave it away already. Happened to all of the prophets. We're going to learn it happened to Moses. Okay? Korah's rebellion. It happens with the people of God being, greedy for dishonest gain was Balaam. We're going to read about that. The prophets were persecuted. Who else was persecuted? Come on. Yes! Yeah, Jesus was persecuted. Abel was put to death. Jesus was put to death. All the prophets were put to death. All but one of the apostles was martyred and faced death. Though they tried to kill John, they didn't get it done. He did not face death, but he was a living martyr, you could say. Meaning John the Apostle. And this also happens throughout the church with the saints. This happens with let's talk about the Lutheran Church. Okay? Robert Barnes was in England. First English-speaking Lutheran, believe it or not. Guess what they did to him? Yeah, killed him. He got killed. In a Protestant country, the Lutheran was killed, okay, for what he was preaching. And that's what happened there. The Lutheran Church was persecuted almost from the beginning of the Reformation. Luther was persecuted for discovering the truth. Charles V and the Pope, filled with pride and hatred for the gospel, desiring to put to death this heresy of Lutheranism. But it wasn't the heresy of Lutheranism, it was the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. And so when the gospel comes forth, does the devil want the gospel proclaimed? No. And so he uses princes and popes to persecute the church.
Isn't there a big lawsuit going over in Sweden against a couple pastors that they're claiming are putting out hate speech.
They actually were acquitted the second time.
They were convicted at first.
Right.
But then they appealed it.
Right. They were, no, actually what happened was they brought them up on charges. It was a woman congressman or woman parliament member and the bishop of the mission diocese, the mission province they call it, of Finland. It's basically an independent confessional Lutheran church that we are in fellowship with. And so he wrote a pamphlet way back when, like before gay marriage was ever legalized, just as a pastor, before he became like the head guy, about biblical marriage and, what God created male and female, and this congresswoman, doctor lady, she was handing these out. She was involved in it too, and they were both charged with hate speech, and they were not convicted. They wanted to. I mean, this lawyer was going after them, and they were acquitted. But the lawyer, what did the lawyer do? Over there, it's not that you're not guilty, and then you're done. Over there, you can appeal both ways. In Europe, if the prosecutor feels that you're guilty, they can appeal the not guilty verdict and make you go through it again, and that's what they did. And so they appealed it higher up, and they were acquitted again. So they went through the trial twice, and thanks be to God that they did for people in Europe, because if they had been convicted, there would be no free speech in Europe at all. Because it was not just about freedom of religion; it was about freedom of speech, and about human rights. Because once they can take away your freedom of conscience and your ability to speak your conscience and to speak the truth, then it doesn't matter any longer. They can do whatever they want, and that's what they're doing. They were trying to pull off over in Europe, and there's been a big pushback against that, fortunately. Great Britain, it's pretty bad there. I mean, they just accuse you of fomenting or spreading misinformation, okay? Disinformation. Whenever you hear somebody start talking about misinformation and disinformation, that is not American talk. That is not the speech of Americans. You know who the originators of this idea of misinformation and disinformation, you know where all that came from? That's Soviet talk, okay? Because the Soviets in Russia, that's the way they would talk, and everything was conformity. You had to conform to the narrative, and if you didn't, you stepped out of line. Okay, what happened to you?
Siberia.
Yeah, they'd march you off to the gulag. KGB, spying constantly, listening in on you. Guess what, folks? This very same thing is happening here in our country today. Okay, we've got a Bolshevik problem in our country now, with CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the IRS. It's all been weaponized, and they're listening in on everything. They're watching everything you say on social media, and they're watching everything that recording every phone call that's made. Okay, and what do we have? We're supposed to have the Fourth Amendment. I believe it's the Fourth Amendment, which is basically, that you have a right to privacy, and they're supposed to have to have a warrant to actually to surveil you and to watch you. But they do it like Stalin did. The way Stalin viewed it was, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. That's Stalin. And so what you end up with is so many laws on the books that basically, and that's where we are today. There's so many laws in the books that, sorry, every day you get up, guess what you're probably doing? Probably breaking the law at some point. And they just have to watch you long enough to figure it out.
They're not even laws that Congress passed. They're laws that bureaucrats
right.
put in place.
Exactly. That's Bolshevism. Okay? It's an administrative state, is Bolshevism. And so we've been asleep. We've been asleep for far too long in that regard. How do we get on that? But where were we? Oh, it was Cain and Abel, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. So we got Korah. Let's go to Korah's rebellion. Let's go to Numbers. Let's read a little bit farther and hear Jude talk about it. So, woe to them, for they walked in the way of Cain and abandoned themselves for the sake of gain to Balaam, Zerah, and perished in Korah's rebellion. These are hidden reefs at your love feasts, as they feast with you without fear. So now let's turn to Numbers 16. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, fourth book of the Bible. So go back here. And six, I believe it's 1 through 40. That's why we're not going to get very far today. Korah's rebellion. That's what we're going to look at. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi. So these guys are priests. Okay, Korah is a part of the priestly class, sons of Levi. This is Leviticus. Okay, all right. This is Numbers, but Leviticus is about the work that the priests must do. And they rose up. Wait. Son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. They assembled themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said to them, ooh, okay. Let's talk about that. How often do Lutheran churches have a Korah's rebellion? Or how often is there a potential for a Korah's rebellion? What? No. Once a month. The potential. And when is that? A voters' meeting. Okay? Right? You got to be wary that you don't engage in a Korah's rebellion. Right? This is why the pastor always prays before the prayer is that we would do everything and be kindly disposed towards one another. Okay, everything's supposed to be done in good order. We don't want to engage in Korah's rebellions. This happens more often than you know. All right. Here's what they said. You have gone too far. In other words, who do you think you are? You've gone too far this time, Moses. For all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? Oh. They're accusing Moses of exalting himself and making himself more important than the people. That's a classic one. What's one of the accusations that's often made against pastors? You're lording it over the flock. Right? Yeah. When Moses heard it, he fell on his face, and he said to Korah and all his company, in the morning, the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to him. In other words, Korah, okay, we'll figure out who's right. So, you guys versus me and the people who are following after me. The one whom he chooses, he will bring near to him. Verse 6. Do this. Take censers, Korah and all his company, put fire in them, and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow. The man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. That's the warning at the end. And Moses said to Korah, Hear now, you sons of Levi. Is it too small a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister to them, and that he has brought you near him, and all your brothers and the sons of Levi with you? And would you seek the priesthood also? Therefore it is against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron, that you grumble against him? Because it's not just against Moses, it's against Aaron as well, that they're rebelling. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and they said, We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness? How often do they say that? They say that all the time. That you must also make yourself prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Yeah, so in other words, we were supposed to be in the promised land already. We're not there yet. So they're just grumbling, they're complaining. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. In other words, we're not going to be there. We're not going to play. We're not going to play, Moses. Nope. And Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, Do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, and I have not harmed one of them. And Moses said to Korah, Be present, you and all your company, before the Lord, you and they and Aaron tomorrow. And let every one of you take his censer and put incense on it, and every one of you bring before the Lord his censer. 250 censers. You also and Aaron, each his censer. So every man took his censer and put fire in them, and laid incense on them, and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Okay, so how do you put fire in a censer? You guys ever done this before? No? Never? Back in the day, what did you used to be able to go and buy at those cheap mall places, right? You go get the sticks, right? Or you get those silly cones. You can get those at Walmart still. Is that really all that good of incense? No, it's terrible. It's awful. Stuff's fake. But the way that you put fire in a censer is censer is basically like a metal. It's a metal bowl on a little stand, and then it has a chain that will come up either on the sides. There'll be 3 chains, could be 4 chains, or you can have 1 chain. It'll come up through the middle, and then it'll have a lid that you have to gently bring down and try not to make sure you don't get all the chains all tangled and it can become a mess. All right, and what you do is you have to take these. It's putting fire. How do you put fire in something? It's coal. You put these coals in there and you light the coals on fire. Now today, you can get these coals they sell them, and they're like trays, and you get them in a box, and there'll be like so many layers, and they're like plastic, and then each little briquette is in there and it's sealed off. And those, they're basically like really good matchlight charcoal, except they're like little hockey pucks about this big, and they have a little indent in the top. And so what you have to do is you just put the coal down in the censer, and then you just light it. And it will just, you can see the flame. It'll go white hot in less than 5 minutes. These things are just really soaked, way better than matchlight charcoal. And so then you do it, and 5 minutes go by, and you've got a nice, depending on how many coals you put in, you need 1, 2, 3. You put 1 in, it'll die pretty fast. You probably should put in 2 or 3. And then what you do is once they're white hot, and then you take you'll have what's called the bowl and the spoon, and the bowl has the incense in it, and you spoon it in. And you can put it into the little indent if you want, or you can just throw it on there. And then becomes this billowing thing where the incense just starts flowing out of it. It's smoke. All right? You guys know what it's called? It's called holy smoke. That's where that comes from. Holy smokes! That's incense. Okay? That's what that is. That's where the whole thing comes from, is that incense is like holy smoke. But this is what's done in the Holy of Holies. And so in the tabernacle, in the book of Numbers, you've got the tent out. It's got this. It's like screened off around here, and then you go in, and they'll have all the stuff set up, like the altar, and where they have the burnt offerings, and then you go up in there, up in like, I don't know if they had steps at this point, but you go into the Holy of Holies, and it's like a rectangle. You walk in this door, and there would be a. I'm going to draw it. I can't visually draw it for you. All right. Here, this is where the ark would be, and then you got a lion with wings here. I know that looks terrible. Looks more like it kind of is an angel. Is what it is. So this is where the ark is, and then right here is the incense altar. There's the screen, and then the smoke would come up before the Lord, literally before the Lord. And you have your candelabra in here. You have like 8 things here, and it's got its base. And then over here would be the bread of the presence. It's where the showbread would be. And I don't know if there's other furniture or the like, but these are the ones that I remember. And so they would come through the door here before the ark, before the screen, and the incense altar would be there. And they would come in, and they would burn incense on the incense altar. And so then you have this whole thing with the censers and the burning of incense. That's what's the context here. All right. I think we're at verse 18. So every man took his censer and put fire in them and laid incense on them and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting with Moses and Aaron. Then Korah assembled all the congregation against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation. Okay, the glory of the Lord is the second person of the Holy Trinity. This is Jesus Christ. So he is in the Holy of Holies. Everybody knows he's there. And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Okay. All right. And they fell on their faces and said, O God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and will you be angry with all the congregation? What's Moses and Aaron doing here? They're interceding on behalf of the people, and they are asking for mercy for Korah and all of his co-conspirators. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to the congregation, get away from the dwelling of Korah, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And in other words, nope, I'm going to take care of this. And Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He spoke to the congregation, saying, "Depart, please, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away with all their sins." So they got away from the dwelling of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents, together with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. And Moses said, "Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it has not been of my own accord. If these men die as all men die, or if they are visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord." And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the peoples who belonged to Korah and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up." And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. Blah. Okay? Yeah. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell Eleazar the son of Aaron, the priest, to take up the censers out of the blaze. Then scatter the fire far and wide, for they have become holy. As for the censers of these men who have sinned at the cost of their lives, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, for they offered them before the Lord, and they became holy." In other words, the censers that they used, they became holy before the Lord. Now the ones holding that were not holy. It's not the censers' fault, so we're going to continue to use these in some manner. For they offered them before the Lord, and they became holy. Thus they shall be assigned to the people of Israel. So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, which those who were burned had offered, and they were hammered out as a covering for the altar, to be a reminder to the people of Israel, so that no outsider who was not of the descendants of Aaron should draw near to burn incense before the Lord, lest he become like Korah and his company, as the Lord said to him through Moses. Okay. Do not engage in a Korah's rebellion. Okay? All right? So, I experienced, I think, 5 of those at one congregation. 5. And their voters' assemblies met 3 times a year. So I was under duress for a year and a half. Fortunately, the district president rebuked those who were involved. Now, he didn't actually do anything to alleviate the situation, really, but he did at least rebuke them on 2 separate occasions, told them that what they were doing was wrong and was sinful. So it does happen in our churches, and I think mostly because people do not know the Old Testament, and they also have this, an antinomian. An antinomianism is lawlessness, meaning Jesus died for me on the cross, I believe in him, therefore I can do whatever I want. Okay? And so there's this mentality in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and in other denominations, but it's particularly bad in ours, over the last 50, 60 years, that this tendency to make the voters' assembly the supreme authority in a congregation, and then use that as a weapon against the pastoral office, has manifested itself pretty badly. Because people don't know their Bibles, and they don't know stories like Korah's rebellion. And is the voters' assembly supreme? No, it's not. What is supreme?
Word of God.
The Word of God is supreme. Is the pastor supreme? No, pastor is not supreme. It's not.
But in our church, what our constitution is, that the pastor's responsibility is the spiritual side, and the voters' assembly
Correct.
is the business side.
Yep.
So,
Which is why pastor can give his opinion.
right.
He can. It's kind of like, it was really funny. My little church that I served up in Willow Springs, Illinois. I taught him all this, everything that we're talking about. Pastor handles spiritual stuff with the elders. Voters' assembly handles, all this other stuff. And they were getting a new roof. Okay? They were getting a new roof. They had to decide what it was going to be. Okay? They went out and got 3 quotes and everything. And, and they decided, okay, we're going to go with this one. And it wasn't the cheapest. It wasn't the most expensive. It was, the guy gave a really good presentation, was going to do a good job. And he did. And it came down to the color. Okay? The color of the roof. And it was 2 options. One of them was going to be, those architectural shingles, that you can get on your home. It's not the ones that are just, just kind of like just the rectangles. It was the ones that, kind of look nice. And so they narrowed it down to 2 choices. One of them was kind of like a beige with a little bit darker of a color, and it was a nice contrast up there. And then the other one was like, had a little bit of black in the background, but with red. And they all wanted to know what my opinion was. In other words, Pastor, which color should we get? I said, I don't know. I don't care. That is not my job. And I'm not going to tell you which color to get. I didn't. Okay? In one group, they were like, well, we want to get this color. And the other group said, well, we want to get this color. I said, the only way you're going to decide is you're going to vote on it. And I said, guess what? Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color the roof is. So I basically had to tell them, don't get bent out of shape. It's just a roof. We're going to vote on it because it doesn't matter, okay? And so the funny thing was, they came to auto vote, and of course it was like 52, 48, the percentage or whatever. The funny thing is they get the roof on, and then it was like the next voters meeting. The people who voted for Brown said what? Guess what they said? We should have got red. So it doesn't matter. It's just funny. It's just one of those things. But yeah, I mean, you're supposed to, when you get together, and this is why your voters meetings have to be orderly. Okay? The committees that are involved, you got to have your ducks in a row. You got to be ready. You got to know what you're saying. You got to have your arguments well laid out. Because there are going to be questions that happen. People are going to bring up this, they're going to bring up that. And you've got to be able to answer those questions. You got to be able to work it through it. And you can't be afraid to answer questions, and you can't be afraid to just vote on something. But a lot of times the trouble will happen in a voters meeting when people aren't prepared. When they're not prepared and they're not ready. And then somebody will come to the meeting inevitably that's bent out of shape about something else. And they'll show up and they'll make a big deal out of something that doesn't matter. Okay? So, yeah. The best voters meeting is what kind of meeting? Best voters meeting is what meeting? One that's less than an hour. Okay? Get in, get out, get done. Boom. Okay? Well, they can, and they do. It just depends on whether or not you've spaced out all of the stuff that needs to be discussed. You don't overly pack your meeting, So, anyway. All right, so that's Korah's rebellion, and we're still moving here. Let's now look at Balaam's error. So we're going to look at Numbers 22 to 24. This is one of the best stories in the Bible. It's just the best. I love it. There's comedy involved. There is comedy in the Bible. God does have a sense of humor. He does. It's like in the book of Acts. What? Right? We just had that really serious thing happen, right? Just now, with Korah's rebellion. But now you're going to see this incident with Balaam and Balaam's donkey. Okay? And then in the book of Acts, this is another evidence of that God is, he does have there's a bit of humor in the Lord. And so with Peter gets out of prison, and he goes and finds the church. And what happens when he knocks on the door? Knocks on the door, says it's Peter. And the little girl answers the door. She opens the door, sees that it's Peter, and what does she do? Shuts the door and says, Peter's outside. That's funny. It really is. And then they're like, well, let him in, So it's, yeah. All right. Chapter 22. Then the people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. And Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was in great dread of the people. Now there were, guess what kind of creatures or beings were among the Amorites? Giants were. Yep. There were giants in the midst of the Amorites. And Moab was in great dread of the people because there were many. Moab was overcome with fear of the people of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, this horde will now lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field. In other words, the people of Israel, because they are there, they are going to consume everything. So Balak the son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to Balaam the son of Beor at Pethor, which is near the river, in the land of the people of Ammah, to call him, saying, behold, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the earth, and they are dwelling opposite me. Come now, curse this people for me, since they are too mighty for me. Perhaps I shall be able to defeat them and drive them from the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian, remember, you have the Midianites. Who is the most famous? The Midian comes into play with what individual? You got Moses, and he flees from Egypt, and he goes to the land of Midian, and he ends up. What's the name of Moses' father-in-law? Isn't it Jethro? I think so. Sounds right. I could be wrong. I don't want to look it up because that'll take too much time. So anyway, Moses' father-in-law is a Midianite priest. Okay? So the Midianites, they worship Yahweh. They do. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees of divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. And he said to them, lodge here tonight, and I will bring back word to you, as the Lord speaks to me. Okay, so Balaam is going to speak to who? The Lord. Balaam he's going to go and talk to God. So the princes of Moab stayed with Balaam. And God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? And Balaam said to God, Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, behold, a people has come out of Egypt, and it covers the face of the earth. Now come, curse them for me. What's the problem for Balaam? The people are God's people. And so Balaam is wanting God to curse his own people that he's brought up out of the land of Egypt. That's not going to work. God said to Balaam, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So Balaam rose in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, Go to your own land, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you." So the princes of Moab rose and went to Balak and said, "Balaam refuses to come with us." Once again Balak sent princes, more in number and more honorable than these. And they came to Balaam and said to him, "Thus says Balak the son of Zippor, let nothing hinder you from coming to me, for I will surely do you great honor, and whatever you say to me I will do. Come, curse this people for me." But Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do less or more. So you too, please stay here tonight, that I may know what more the Lord will say to me." And God came to Balaam at night and said to him, "If the men have come to call you, rise, go with them, but only do what I tell you." So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. But God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way of his adversary. Now he was riding on the donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road, with a drawn sword in his hand. Okay, well, let's talk about this being. Is this just an angel? Is this just an angel? Well, if Pastor's asking the question, then no, this is not just an angel. This is the angel of the Lord, meaning this is the messenger of Yahweh. And who is the messenger of Yahweh? Jesus is. Okay? The angel of the Lord is the one who appeared to Moses in the burning bush, and he is the one who spoke the word. This is the very same one. The angel of the Lord with a drawn sword. Now, we don't think about Jesus in this way, now do we? No, we don't. But that's who this is. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand, and the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. So, Balaam, put on your movie camera of imagination, riding along on this silly animal. The donkey's coming up. He's like, you can hear him. He's making these donkey noises and everything, and he sees the angel of the Lord with a drawn sword, and donkey's like, nope, right? Off into the field. You imagine what Balaam's doing. What is going on? Right? And what are donkeys known for? Being stubborn, doing what they want. Well, he probably is thinking that this donkey is just being stubborn and being disobedient. And the donkey turned aside out of the road and went to the field. And Balaam struck the donkey to turn her into the road. In other words, this donkey's just being a donkey. Then the angel of the Lord stood in the narrow path between the vineyards, with a wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. In other words, she is like trying to go around the angel of the Lord. And so Balaam's foot is getting all smashed and scraped against the wall. So he strikes her again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left, not going around. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. She just sat down. Not doing this, no more. Right, and Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam said to the donkey, what's crazy here is that the donkey's talking, and then what's even crazier, he talks back, okay? And Balaam said to the donkey, "Because you have made a fool of me, I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you." And the donkey said to Balaam, Am I not your donkey on which you have ridden all your life long to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way?" And he said, "No." Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam. He saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed down and fell on his face. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside before me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, surely just now I would have killed you and let her live." Then Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood in the road against me. Now therefore, if it is evil in your sight, I will turn back." The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but speak only the word that I tell you." So Balaam went on with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam had come, he went out to meet him at the city of Moab, on the border formed by the Arnon, at the extremity of the border. And Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not send to you to call you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you?" Balaam said to Balak, "Behold, I have come to you. Have I now any power of my own to speak anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that must I speak." Then Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiriath Huzoth. And Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and sent for Balaam and for the princes who were with him. And in the morning Balak took Balaam and brought him up to Bamoth Baal, and from there he saw a fraction of the people. Okay, so we got the whole thing that happens with Balaam's ass, and ultimately Balaam ends up, what happens to Balaam in the end? Eventually he dies too. But in this case, what he ends up doing here is he ends up speaking the word that God told him to speak and not speaking what he wanted to speak. And the sin of Balaam here is that he was going to speak the word of God in order to get what? To get a reward. Okay? He was greedy for dishonest gain. You know, even if you were to give me this house made of silver and gold, okay, you wouldn't be able to do it, but then he ends up going anyway. You know, God's going to kill him, but it says you can still go, but you can only speak what I tell you. Now, if he's a true priest of Yahweh, well then, or a true prophet of Yahweh, that's what he's going to do, and he ends up doing that against the wishes of Balak. Okay, so, all right. So now let's turn back to Jude. So now we know the background of Korah's rebellion and Balaam. So let's go back to Jude and let's push forward a little bit more in the brief amount of time that we have. Verse 12. These are hidden reefs, meaning these false teachers. These false teachers that are like the citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah, that are like fallen angels, that are like those who were in Korah's rebellion, that were like Balaam and committing his sin. These are, and also like Cain, these are hidden reefs at your love feasts. What are the love feasts? Love feasts are, back then, they celebrated and worshiped a little bit differently than we do. Okay? They'd get together, they would hear the readings, they would hear the apostolic word, they would pray, and then they would have the Lord's Supper. But the Lord's Supper was in the midst of a love feast, meaning it would be a fellowship. No, I've said this before in Bible class here. Basically, the easiest way to understand it is that they would have a Lutheran potluck after they heard the sermon and after they heard basically the service of the word. Okay, let's go downstairs and let's have a potluck and let's have the Lord's Supper in the middle of the potluck. That's what it would be. And this is what, in the Corinthian church, they started to separate out. The rich people would be over here, and they would only share with each other, and then the poor people would be over there, and they would only have scraps, and they weren't sharing together equally. And so what you end up having here is you have these false teachers in the midst of their communion, their love feasts, their celebration of the Lord, and their celebration of fellowship with one another, and their sharing of what God has given them. So you've got these false teachers in their very midst who are, what does he say of them? Hidden reefs at your love feast. What is a reef? Okay? If you're in the boat, okay? Because he kind of is moving pretty fast here. The church is known as a what? As an ark. You get put up into the boat, you get hauled up into the boat, you've been fished out of the abyss, and you're put into the boat. And so the boat's going along, and when you're coming near to land, what do the sailors have to look out for? You got to watch out for the reef, because you could be going along, and you see the harbor. You've got to negotiate, that water that's becoming increasingly shallow, and if there's a reef there, and the harbor could be right there, the dock. And you hit that reef, guess what? Yeah, you're done. Okay? You're probably going to get, if you're that close and there's a reef, you're close enough, you'll probably get to the shore, but your cargo, your boat, it's done. So you got to watch out. These guys, in other words, these false teachers can wreck the ship. That's what that means. At your love feast, as they feast with you without fear, shepherds feeding themselves, waterless clouds, swept along by winds. Okay, what's a waterless cloud? Okay. Well, a cloud is made up of water, right? But if you have a preacher, what should the preacher be preaching? The Word. This is why last Sunday, for the fourth Sunday of Advent, the fourth Sunday of Advent, we say at the beginning of the intro, it's shower, O heavens, and come down. In other words, we want our preachers to be filled with, we want them to be bringing us the wet water of the Word of God so that fruit can come forth from the soil where the seed is planted in us, and that we can bear fruit. Okay? So these waterless clouds, in other words, they preach, they may say good things, but there's no word of God coming forth from them. It's just, you can get a lot of it. This is one of the, some of the most popular preachers say nothing. Okay? Some of the most popular preachers say absolutely nothing. They say a lot of nice things, but they actually are not preaching God's word. You'll get a series of stories, anecdote, story, anecdote, splash of Jesus, another anecdote, or a nice little story. And it may or may not have anything to do with what the reading was that was just read from the lectern. But the guy told some nice stories, and he might even tell a couple of jokes in there. Makes us laugh, makes us feel good. But did he actually preach to you the Word of God? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe some of the time he did. And that's this one. But one of the criticisms fortunately has happened recently in our church body is Matthew Harrison came forward and basically said that in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod has a crisis of preaching. That we've had a crisis of preaching probably for the last 30 or 40 years. That our preaching actually has not been that good. Really. And for that reason, nice story, anecdote, joke, a little bit of Jesus in there, and then another nice story and a joke. And the proof is in the pudding, in our congregations. Now what's the answer? Well, the answer is good preaching. No, we have to define what good preaching is. What is good preaching? It's preaching that preaches what the scriptures say, that preaches the word of God faithfully. Now, when you suddenly bring that into a congregation or into a church body where you're suddenly going to be preaching Christ and him crucified and Jesus, and you've had the diet of story, anecdote, joke, what can happen? You can have people that will reject the good and sound preaching of good sound doctrine, and they will reject that. So that does happen. So these guys, they are swept along by winds, swept along by winds of doctrine, tossed to and fro. That's the nature of false teachers. Fruitless trees in late autumn, twice dead, uprooted. Wild waves of the sea casting up the foam of their own shame. Wandering stars for whom the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved forever. What is a wandering star? Now we need to get back into a little bit of astronomy / astrology here. What? Nope. A wandering star is a planet. Okay, why? Because when you see, we know them to be planets, okay? But in the ancient world, and they would know they were planets to some extent, but their defining characteristic between a planet and a star was a little bit less than ours. And what we have to realize is that we classify them a little bit differently. Most people don't realize it. Jupiter and Saturn probably aren't planets. They're probably brown dwarf stars, believe it or not, that didn't fully mature. But anyway, so you've got if you look at the night sky, what can happen to, as we're spinning around, you get the other planets going here, they're all going around. At some point, we will actually pass. What can happen is planets they look like they'll do a loop in the sky. That's what's known as a wandering star. Because the stars that are up there, like look at Orion. You guys know where Orion is in the heavens? Typically you look to I think it's the south. Look to the south and you'll see Orion up in the skies. He's got the 3 stars in the middle, and then he's got the 2 up here, 2 down here, and there's like several others, but they're not the big ones. But you know where Orion is. If you look to the north, you know where the Big Dipper is. He's just up there, and the Big Dipper moves around the North Star, and the North Star is the most fixed one of all. North Star doesn't move. But all of these stars that are up there, you know where they are in the night sky. They're fixed. You know where they're going to be. But with the planets, when they're going around the sun, they wander all over the place. And they move in and out of constellations and the like. That's what this is. So they just wander about. They're not fixed. They're not, basically, this is like not having a good foundation. They're not set in stone. They're just moving all over the place. That's what these false teachers are like. Okay? All right. For whom the gloom of utter darkness has been reserved forever. Okay. So next week we will continue with verse 14. Let us pray. Lord God, bless your word wherever it is proclaimed. Make it a word of power and peace to convert those not yet your own, to confirm those who have come to saving faith. May your word pass from the ear to the heart, from the heart to the lip, and from the lip to the life, that as you have promised, your word may achieve the purpose for which you sent it, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right. Enjoy your new year. Hopefully see some of you tonight, 6:30.